Ellie McCabe, who's a graduate student with Dr. Don Chandler, and she's the team that's responsible for the Beetle Bandit in the title of the advertising for this program. So take it away, Ellie.
Yes, I'm going to talk about the Smokey Winged Beetle Bandit, which is a useful tool in monitoring the spread of emerald ash borer. So this is the Smokey Winged Beetle Bandit. Its scientific name is Cerceris pennis. It's a solitary ground-dwelling wasp. You can easily identify it from its nice smoky dark wings. Also, it has one yellow band on its abdomen. The females of the species have 3 yellow marks on its face, and the males only have 2 yellow marks. The males are also a little bit smaller than the females. It's a solitary ground-dwelling wasp, which means that it lives in one wasp per nest in the ground. They like hard, sandy, packed soils. And even though they live in one wasp per nest, they like to aggregate into groups. So you can find them up to about 100 wasps per area. In that picture there's about 25 nests in that campsite. However, the nests that we study, there's about 200 wasp nests in the area. The range in the United States is everywhere east of the Rockies, up into Canada. This is their life cycle in New Hampshire. They emerge as adults in late June, early July, depending on the weather. Then they mate for about 2 weeks. Then the males actually die off. The females continue to live, and they hunt for brood-crested beetles. Brood-crested are the jewel wood-boring beetles, so they bore into our trees, and a lot of them are pest species. They paralyze these beetles and then bring them back to their nest and bury them underground. They lay the eggs on top of the thorax of the beetles. These eggs will develop into larvae and then feed on the brood-cresteds that are underground with them. And then in late August to September, the larva will develop into pupa, and the pupa will overwinter as pupa. And then in late June, again, they'll develop into adults and start the cycle over again. So why do we care about this wasp? Well, it's bringing back these brood-crested beetles, and one species that's a really big pest is the emerald ash borer. The emerald ash borer, scientific name Agrillus planopennis, was discovered in North America in 2002 in Michigan. It actually probably came to the United States about 3 years before that. Its origin is Eastern Asia. It feeds on all species of ash trees. The adults do feed on the leaves of ash trees, but the damage actually comes from the larvae, which feed on the camomile region of the tree. The adults lay their eggs on the bark, and then the larvae will bore into the tree, and you can see those tunnels there. The larvae have a very distinct shape. They have very distinct bell-shaped segments on their body, but you can't really see any of this until you peel the bark of the ash tree. And the tree dies 3 years after infection, so you don't actually really know you have an infection until 3 years after your tree dies. The only thing you really can see is the D-shaped exit holes, which are very small and occur a year after they emerge. So the emerald ash borer first came in 2002 to Michigan, and since then it's spread to 29 states and 2 Canadian provinces, and we do have it here in New Hampshire. And it's caused a lot of damage. It's expected to cause about $20 billion of damage by 2019. In New Hampshire, it first came in 2013 into Concord, and it spread all around Merrimack County. In the purple on that map, you can see where it's been quarantined. The emerald ash borer adult can only fly about a half a mile. So the quarantine is really important because how it spreads across county lines and across state lines is through the spread of ash wood with the larva and with the eggs on it. And on the other side, I have the frequency of ash trees in New Hampshire. And you can see that actually most of our ash trees in the yellow and the red on the map are on the western side of New Hampshire and not actually in the southeast in Merrimack County. So hopefully we can keep it quarantined. Bringing it back to the wasp, the Smokey winged beetle bandit, why are we using this in the biosurveillance of emerald ash borer? Well, it hunts repressive beetles almost exclusively, and it can catch repressive beetles in smaller numbers than traditional methods like traps or netting. And then it brings the beetles back to a nest where they're easy to collect. And also these nests are in anthropogenically disturbed areas that are easy to access, unlike traps that are out in the forest. And the wasps are easy to identify, so a lot of people can get involved, which is nice. And finally, the wasps don't sting, which is nice. Now I'm going to go through on how to monitor a colony if you have a colony nearby and you want to get involved. First, you want to locate the nests of the Smokey winged beetle bandit. So they look a lot like kind of ants' nests with a hill on both sides, except for the entrance is going to be larger for a wasp to enter in and out. You might see nests that have a hill on one side. That's going to be from a different kind of wasp. Or you might see flat nests that are from tiger beetles, but those are different. Then you want to choose nests to watch throughout the day and place clear plastic cups over the nest. You want to make sure that they have a ventilation system on them though. Otherwise, you're going to overheat the nest and you might actually kill the wasps inside. The clear plastic cups will allow the wasps to see in and out. However, it will allow you to control when they're entering and exiting. Then you can just wait as long as you want, all day, like we do. And you can allow them to enter in and out, and when they come back with a beetle, you can catch them with a net, and then they usually just drop their beetle and you can take their beetle from them. Sometimes they really don't want to give up their beetle, and then you can just squeeze their thorax, and then they'll drop their beetle. Another thing you can do is you can look for drops. Sometimes they'll just drop a beetle on their own accord. They'll do this because there will be flies and also velvet ants that are actually kleptoparasites, so they're trying to steal the beetles for themselves, and then they'll just drop these. Also, if you don't have time to monitor the nest, sometimes you can just look for drops, so that's something you can do. At the end of the day, you want to take the drops and the ones you took from the monitored nests home, and you want to identify your beetles. If you're just looking for emerald ash borer, it's going to be in the genus Agrilis, so it's going to be about 2 centimeters, and it's going to be nice and thin. It's going to be a shiny green. You are going to have some other shiny green bruprestids that you might have. There's some in the genus Chrysobrothris, but they're going to be a little bit more diamond shape, kind of like the one next to it on that slide right there. If you think you have an emerald ash borer, you can go to newhampshirebugs.org and you can fill out an invasive species report. Now I'm going to talk about the projects that I do at the university. I study the biology of the wasps. Two of the main things that I do is I excavate their nests to understand the structure of the wasp nest and to determine their productivity throughout the summer. I also do a catch and release test to determine their homing range and their flight times. These are my methods for excavating the nests. I dig a hole that has a radius of 40 centimeters from their nest entrance, and then I dig down 30 centimeters deep, and then I slowly scrape away the sides looking for any cells containing beetle parts and pupa. With this, I can build 3D models of the nests that can give me an idea of how large these nests are and what their general structure is. I also look at the average productivity of the wasps. So we find that the average productivity, their average pupa that they create is about 4.6, and so far there's a range of about 0 to 11. And the average number of beetles that they are bringing back in the nests that we've dug up is about 19, and there's a really large range of about 1 to 61. And the really large range is because some of them are bringing back really large beetles, like the Dicerca divaricata on top, and some of them are bringing back really small beetles, like the Brachius octavacus on the bottom. So we're finding that if they're bringing back smaller beetles, they need a lot of beetles to create pupa. And if they're bringing back larger beetles, they only really need one beetle to create a pupa. Another thing we're doing is we're looking at the productivity of monitored nests and undisturbed nests to see if there's a difference. We wanted to make sure that our activity throughout the summer wasn't causing them to abandon their nests or change their behavior. Luckily, both in the average number of beetles and the average number of pupa, there wasn't a significant difference. So this suggests that the monitoring activities of humans isn't causing them to abandon their nests. Our flight method tests at our 2 sites in Boscawen, New Hampshire and Epsom, New Hampshire, we take wasps from their nests and we release them at 3 different locations at 0.2 kilometers, at 0.4 kilometers, and 1 kilometer. And then we just wait to see if they return to their nests and how long it takes them to return. This is a combined results from both of the sites and the distances. And we released 23 wasps at each of the distances, and most of them returned. So this is suggesting that within the homing range, they can return from all of those distances. And this is again, pooled from both of the sites, how long on average it took them to return from those distances. It was significantly different from 1 kilometer than from 0.2 kilometers. However, 1 kilometer is a lot longer distance than 0.2 kilometers. So it might just be that 1 kilometer is longer than 0.2 kilometers. However, it also might be 1 kilometer is out of their hunting range. So more has to be looked into what is actually in their hunting range for that to be known. Thank you to everyone in my lab and to the sites and to New Hampshire Agriculture Station. Any questions?